Well, for the first time in 15 years, the American Academy of Pediatrics released new guidelines for treating childhood obesity, and the message is clear. Early intervention is critical, and waiting can be very dangerous.
New recommendations to treat childhood obesity now include weight loss pills and surgery. That's according to the American Academy of Pediatrics.
The American Academy of Pediatrics is out with new guidelines for the first time in 15 years when it comes to the treatment for childhood obesity. AAP now says weight loss drugs should be considered when treating children.
Now, some parents may question whether the recommendations for drugs and surgery in some cases go too far, but Nora, the AAP is making it clear that more aggressive early intervention is needed.
Some doctors claim the pandemic even made things worse, with kids in lockdown getting less activity.
1 in 5 children and teens are struggling with obesity, and the pandemic seems to have exacerbated the problem.
Doctors say they're seeing normal weight children become overweight or even obese, as many are going to their doctors for the first time since the pandemic began. And the results are alarming. Many of the children with obesity gained 20 to 30 pounds during the pandemic.
As we've been reporting for a while now, childhood obesity is increasing at an alarming rate, especially in the wake of the pandemic. 14.5 million American children have obesity.
Well, the pandemic fed destructive behaviors of inactivity and unhealthy eating, so parents should focus on a healthy future for themselves as well and their children, in addition to exploring these treatment options.
America has a pandemic even more widespread than COVID: overweight and obesity. More than 2/3 of Americans are either obese or overweight.
What we're trying to do is change the mindset of the individual children so that we can have them think about food in a more positive way.
Dr. Diane Hess joins me now. She's the founder and medical director of Gramercy Pediatrics in New York City. Dr. Hess, how significant is this move to treating childhood obesity with both weight loss pills and surgery?
Well, they have been around. Some of the medicines are more recently approved for the use of ages 12 and up. Surgery we've had, it's not new. It's important because now we have guidelines. We have guidelines that we hope the insurance companies will recognize and actually start paying for obesity care and not consider it something cosmetic. I think that's our biggest challenge.
How does Wegovy help you lose weight? I guess we start with, what is Wegovy?
I love this. So that's the brand name for a prescription medication known as Semaglutide. It was FDA approved to treat the conditions of overweight and obesity back in June last year, but it has been around for quite some time, used as a diabetes medication. It slows the emptying of the stomach and affects how our bodies process glucose, sugar. Extremely effective for weight loss. Now, here is the big issue. Because I am board certified in obesity medicine, I have prescribed this medication to a number of patients. Insurance now almost across the board not covering it, and the price tag is massive. $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month. It's an injection that you give yourself once a week, does not hurt.
As these guidelines become more adopted, insurance will be more open to covering them.
Some of these new medications are showing an awful lot of promise, but they're out of touch if you can't afford them. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
No matter the dose, Wegovy's wholesale price is about $1,300 per month.
Another problem with this drug is it's going to cost about $1,200 each and every month. Obviously, Novo Nordisk wants you to take this for the rest of your life. It's a once-a-week injection that goes just under the skin, and they love it if you did that for the rest of your life. It'd be great for their profit model.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics, which if you've got kids, you kind of trust, apparently, has issued new guidance on obesity. And you don't want to think that any medical association exists to make money for drug companies, but you have to kind of wonder, in light of the American Academy of Pediatrics' new guidelines for childhood obesity. Now, anyone who's tried to lose weight, we can speak to this directly, knows stop eating a lot of sugary food and you'll probably lose weight. But that's not the guidance. They're saying that kids as young as 13 years old should take weight loss medication.
And it requires long-term effective treatment. And that's why this medication is a real advance. We're talking about long-term management of a chronic condition.
These new guidelines, are shocking to some people, recommending drugs as a tool to fight obesity for kids as young as 12, surgery for kids as young as 13. seems to be a pretty dramatic escalation from, the previous protocols. Do you think the science backs this up?
Yes, I do. And that's exactly why these protocols have been escalated, as you mentioned. A previous approach to childhood obesity was more of a watchful waiting and, of course, trying to intervene with lifestyle changes. However, we now have great randomized controlled trials. And
I think the average person walking the street thinks that, well, okay, so a big pharma corporation, they think they've come up with a blockbuster drug. Probably the best way to do the science would be to hand that over to an independent third-party university research firm who has no dog in the race, right? And let them do the 68-week trial and see what they find. And indeed, that would be the purest way to do this. But the way the U.S. system's currently set up, that's not how it happens. So what you need to understand is this study was 100% funded by Novo Nordisk, the manufacturer, who stands to reap billions and billions of dollars. Every single researcher whom I've listed here, from the lead researcher, Dr. Wilding, all the way down to Dr. Kushner, is on the payroll of Novo Nordisk in some capacity. Some people are actually literal employees. Some get lecture fees, speaking fees, traveling fees, advisory board fees, consulting fees. Some own stock in Novo Nordisk. So you can see that all these researchers, without exception, have a vested interest in Wegovy doing what they hope that it does, as does Novo Nordisk. So I really think they ignored the human nature behind all this when they did the research for this study. It brings to mind the quote that actually you may be thinking about it too, from our old friend Upton Sinclair. Remember, he said, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it." That's kind of a law of human nature, isn't it? Another problem I see with this is that semaglutide actually has a black box warning. Black box warnings are the most serious warning that the FDA requires to be put on medication. It signifies that the drug carries a significant risk of serious or even life-threatening adverse effects. Only about 600 prescription medications in the United States have a black box warning, and semaglutide is one of those.
Now, the cons are that when you stop Wegovy, there's a rebound in weight gain.
This is not a surprise. They knew this from the clinical trials.
They did.
Yes, that if you go off the drug, the weight comes back. Look, obesity is a disease. This is a lifelong problem. This is biologic. So this is something that has to be taken long term.
So we need to emphasize the fact that the only way to really maintain a healthy weight is through diet and exercise. The other issue is that we don't know the lifelong and long-term effects of this.
But there's two problems with that. One is the expense. We just talked about that. But the other is there's no long-term trials.
That's what I think, as we always think about, right?
I mean, it's one thing that if a drug's been around for 3-4 years and we know that it doesn't cause problems and it works, but 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, what's that going to do to your pancreas? What's that going to do to your kidneys? So we don't really know.
Very rare side effects of pancreatitis, but otherwise it's really GI side effects, nausea, vomiting, constipation, diarrhea, very minimally treated with low doses.
But if you have nausea at the low level, does that mean you can't take the medication?
It doesn't. Your body has to get used to the drugs. And you can stay on the low level for as long as it takes to relieve the nausea, and only then do you go up to a higher dose.
You need someone to guide you through the shark-infested waters of healthcare. This is a decision that has to be made as a unit, as a family, with your healthcare provider to decide what the right thing to do is.
And what ages are we talking about here, doctor, in terms of making the decisions that are best to handle this issue before it starts to grow into some of those larger problems that you mentioned?
So the article is for ages 2 and up.
Outlining treatment options for children as young as 2.
AAP states this approach should be used for kids 6 and older, but it could be used for those as young as 2.
He said that the biggest increase was in children aged 5 to 9.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics have these new guidelines out today to try and stunt those numbers. And it all starts with children as young as 2.
If it were up to me, every first grader, every single one of them would be evaluated and determine what we need to do to get them on a trajectory of good health.
Absolutely. It is very disheartening and disappointing to see that we've come to this point where we have to do dramatic solutions like medications and surgery in our children. So we have a lot more to do from the day they're born in terms of how they're developing. It's a chronic condition, just like asthma. However, it has a multifactorial contributions, unlike asthma, which are a little bit more direct and you can attack the problem at its origin. But to treat it like a medical condition is the key. It is not a social condition. It is not just a psychological condition.
There's the emotional and kind of psychosocial impacts that are arguably even bigger and definitely more immediate for the kid.
Even on the more psychosocial side, you think about stressors and stigma, bullying that goes along with increased weight.
But here's the thing, just as importantly, there's really honestly a lot of unfair and harsh stigma that kids with obesity can face. So even though the disease is complex and often related to genetics and socioeconomic status more than personal choices, the kids can really be teased and made fun of by other kids, and all of that is all related.
The emotional scars from the negative feedback that you get as a kid sometimes can be a very, very big problem. And then over the age of 13, you would consider bariatric surgery. If none of the other modalities work, you can't just let it be. You've got to deal with it, Leslie.
Yeah, Dr. Mike, I'm curious, what are the long-term implications of it? And I was 250 pounds in 4th grade, so I fit right into the category of childhood obesity. What are the implications, if any? Are there studies that show, if a teenager were to get things like bariatric surgery, how does that affect them in life?
We know for a fact that many young folks that are obese end up with health problems down the road. That we know for a fact. So what we're getting at is we need to really undertake an aggressive approach. That's the bottom line. Whether it involves surgery, medications, and whether we know the long-term effects, these are all things that you take into account when you meet with your healthcare provider.
As obesity medicine providers, we recognize how important it is to really view obesity as a disease. Weight is not a result of just lack of effort or willpower. It is a disease, and it's complex, and there are many factors that contribute to it, from genetics to environment.
It does seem, though, that the conversation has shifted away from prevention and addressing some of those root causes and more towards treatment.
But University of Arizona Dr. Shad Marvasti wonders if doctors will overuse these treatment options instead of focusing on why adolescents are obese.
We've let things go too far, and we need to do what we can to stop it from happening in the first place.
Marvasti suggests prioritizing a bigger push for healthier school lunches and keeping PE classes a requirement through high school over any medication or surgery.
When we looked at factors that were related to obesity that occurred among both the boys and the girls, 2 things stood out. One was TV time, so more television time, more risk for obesity. Kind of makes sense. And then school lunches. So if boys and girls reported eating school lunches frequently, they were also more likely to be heavier and to be obese.
I do not eat the school lunch. If I eat the food on a regular basis here, I gain weight. I think really what we serve them is more convenience for our central kitchen to mass produce it and get it out, and where we just have to keep it warm.
Today we're serving chicken strips.
there is one place where we know that kids have access to 2 nutritious meals a day, and that's in school. And studies showed that school meals are the healthiest and sometimes the only meals that kids eat in a day.
Ones it really impacts. And for some, school lunches are the best meal they're going to get throughout the day.
These kids are showing up to school every day, but at home they're not eating, and it makes you rethink everything, like holidays, like, oh, 3-day weekend, great. Well, that means that these kids aren't eating for 3 days, or snow days, but that means that not only are these kids not eating, but they're also at home in an environment that's probably not good for them.
And many families now rely on schools to feed their kids. So let me tell you what's included in a school meal today. Every school lunch includes fruits, vegetables, whole grain, protein, and milk in balanced portions. Schools every week serve red-orange vegetables, dark green vegetables, and legumes.
The Department of Agriculture got creative and declared ketchup a vegetable. The backlash was so strong, the funding cut was quickly reversed. But ketchup hasn't been the only product to stretch the definition of what makes a vegetable. Even today, some school pizza sauces count as a serving of veggies.
French fries, obviously, are made out of potatoes, and potatoes are a vegetable. That was another defeat, I would say, that the USDA experienced because of industry lobbying.
Yes, fries still count as a veggie. Frozen potato wedges are on the USDA's vegetable list for child nutrition programs. Those bags of frozen foods have to come from somewhere, which is where companies like Tyson come in. The company, valued at more than $21 billion, saw the opportunity and acted. Tyson has its own K-12 product catalog of frozen foods made just for school cafeterias.
But whoever decided that a chicken should look like a heart, a giraffe, a star? Well, Tyson did, because there's no chicken in the chicken, and that they figured out that we could sell this stuff to kids. You know, what's wrong with teaching kids that chicken looks like chicken? But this is what most schools serve.
This tray of Doritos, meat and beans, was served to children, and parents say that they were unaware of what was being served. Huntsville City Schools Nutrition Program Director Henry Ward says the menu is available to both parents and students. The parents say that something is broken in the school's nutrition programs. The director said that what was in the tray is not regular Doritos, but a healthier brand.
Well, we don't serve regular Doritos, first of all. We serve our Doritos are low-fat, all of our chips are baked.
But if you really boil it down, the answer is money. Lots and lots of money. Today, the 4.9 billion lunches that get doled out in school cafeterias every year make up a multi-billion-dollar industry that makes sure millions of kids are fed. It starts with federal money, but on its way to cafeterias, school districts have to order the meals, and food giants grab a big slice of the school lunch pie.
Remember that from kindergarten to 12th grade, the average kid spends nearly 6.5 years of their life in school. Unfortunately, healthy, nutritious meals are not the norm at most schools. Terry Allen is the commissioner of the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. Terry, good to see you again.
Glad to be here, Rick.
One of the things that kids do is eat in school. Some kids have one meal, some 2 or 3. Almost half the kids in Ohio participate in their school's lunch program. What are kids eating right now at school?
Well, they could be doing a lot better than we'd like. We know that certainly from national coverage on this issue and what we see in schools here in Cuyahoga County and around Ohio is tater tots, pizza, burgers, things that aren't healthy, choices that you prefer they wouldn't make in the schools. High calorie dense, high sugary foods, brownies, lots of candies, the sugar, salt, fat, human instinctual thing that we're all drawn to. Those are problems that we need to combat, and it affects our kids' ability to learn.
The system that we currently have is called a pre-pack system. It's very efficient. It's built on the Industrial Revolution model where people stand in a line and they pack, the 3 chicken nuggets, and then they pack a handful of fries and then grab those and eat with their hands on a daily basis.
Well, this is the food I found 24 months ago. This is not even food. This is the stuff we were feeding our kids. Extremo burritos, corn dogs, pizza pockets, grilled cheese sandwiches. Everything came in plastic, in cardboard. The only kitchen tools my staff had was a box cutter. The only working piece of equipment in my kitchen was a can crusher, because if it didn't come in a can, it came frozen in a box. The USDA allows this. The USDA allows all of this stuff. In case you can't tell, that's like pink Danish and some kind of cupcake. Chicken nuggets, tater tots, chocolate milk with high fructose, canned fruit cocktail, a reimbursable meal. That's what the government says it's okay to feed our kids. It ain't okay. You know what? It is not okay. There's a lot of stuff we can do. There's a lot of schools doing farm-to-school programs. There's a lot of schools actually getting fresh food into schools. Now, in Berkeley, we've gone totally fresh. We have no high fructose corn syrup, no trans fats, no processed foods. We're cooking from scratch every day. We have 25% of our... Thank you. 25% of our stuff is organic and local. We cook. Those are my hands. I get up at 4 a.m. every day and go cook the food for the kids, because this is what we need to do. We can't keep serving kids processed crap full of chemicals and expect these are going to be healthy citizens. You're not going to get the next generation or the generation after to be able to think like this if they're not nourished. If they're eating chemicals all the time, they're not going to be able to think. They're not going to be smart. You know what? They're just going to be sick.
The biggest misconception about weight and obesity is that somehow your weight is under your control. Obesity is a disease of the pathways that regulate your energy balance.
I think we have to get beyond this whole idea that being overweight or having obesity is a problem of willpower or willful misconduct, and if you just worked harder, that's not how we think about obesity.
Don't just tell your patients, eat less and exercise more. We're way past that. We're way past that. And really, I think recognizing obesity as a disease versus a personal decision is probably the biggest message.
Whereas if we can prevent diabetes, it would be so much more cost effective. But we know that the U.S. healthcare system is broken. I can't refer a patient to a nutritionist unless they have type 2 diabetes. So I need my patient to get type 2 diabetes in order for their insurance to cover a nutritionist.
A recent study from the Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital compared the benefits of 3 different types of diets for children who are obese and also uncovered one surprising challenge from their own parents.
We studied 9 to 18-year-olds who were at the greater than 95th percentile for their body mass index, which is the definition of obesity. So we studied them and one of their parents and randomly assigned them to one of 3 healthy eating patterns, either the Mediterranean diet, the American Heart Association diet, or a plant-based diet.
Dr. Michael McKinnon says they discovered all 3 of the diets had similar results when it came to improving a child's health, including significant decreases in weight, blood pressure, cholesterol, and glucose levels. The risk for heart disease also declined. But researchers made some other interesting discoveries along the way. For example, the child didn't have to be perfect in the way they ate. The average compliance with the diets was just 55 to 65% throughout the year-long study, yet they still saw impressive changes.
We were able to help 50% of our patients without medicine. So the fact that pediatricians are going to be grabbing for the pharmaceuticals, right off the bat, I think is putting the cart before the horse. If we're going to be using these drugs in kids, are we setting them up for problems later on? Just because they're not acute problems, but chronic problems? Is that a great idea?
To the Wellspring Academy in rural North Carolina. It's a boarding school like no other for kids 11 to 18. She joined students like 16-year-old Michael Schlesinger, who arrived 9 months ago. He weighed a staggering 428 pounds.
Was there a straw that broke the camel's back for you?
I'd get out of breath walking down the block. It just became to the point where I had enough. And seatbelts became a problem.
In the car?
Yeah. And it just bothered me to know that I can't even barely sit in the car anymore.
Michael says his first week felt like torture.
I had shin splints where it would hurt to walk, and It was tough.
How many times did you want to quit?
In that first week, I can't even think I can count that high.
Weight loss is the core curriculum here. The school year is literally a race to save their students' lives. They'll spend months cut off from their families. They get just 2 10-minute phone calls home a week. Of course, the students have a weekly weigh-in.
And how did you do on Monday?
269.
And how'd you do today?
267.5.
All right! The first couple times you got on the scale, what was that like?
My first week here, I lost 15 pounds.
You lost 15 pounds in a week?
That's what made me want to keep going.
He averages a 7-pound weekly weight loss. Over 9 months, he manages to lose 160 pounds. Childhood obesity has tripled over the past 30 years. Now, nearly 1 in every 3 school-age kids in America is obese or overweight. But Wellspring believes the solution to this alarming epidemic lies as much in a kid's mind as in their metabolism.
Mind over matter.
The students will undergo intense behavior modification through meticulous food diaries.
Every day you just do like what you ate in that meal, the calories, the fat grams.
Michael's whole physique is so completely altered, his own father didn't recognize him on his last visit home for spring break.
He walked right by me.
He walked right by you?
Yep.
What did you say?
Well, I stopped him. I tapped him on the shoulder, hugged me, and kind of just went on our way.
Now, the story of Brianna Bond. At just 9 years old, she weighed almost 200 pounds, one of the millions of American kids struggling with obesity. And wait till you see Brianna now. You ready to come on out? Come on, Brianna. Come on over. You look fantastic. So you lost now, what, 66 pounds. How do you feel?
Great.
I'll bet you do. And you look so great right now. You look so healthy and happy. Heidi and Dan Bond, Brianna's parents are here as well. And Heidi, you took the initiative here. You really started this. And there's so many parents out there who have the same struggle. Tell us how you did it.
Her pediatrician always said that she'd grow into her body. And then after a while, we, went and got other doctors' opinions. We had her tested from everything from thyroid to diabetes. Her endocrinology got tested, allergies, and everything came out fine. So we knew at that point that we had to step things up. She joined a swim team. Along with healthy eating, we changed our eating habits completely.
What was the hardest part for you?
When I first started, it was the walking, because it was just, I wasn't used to it.
You weren't, but you just went out there and you guys did it every single day as a family.
Yes, there's not, in the beginning we did it as a family. There was nothing that stopped us. We went at night, in the rain, in the hail, in the fog, nothing. We had a zero tolerance policy. We're doing the walk no matter what.
How else has this changed your life? All good? What's the best part?
That I can be involved with sports and I could keep up with my friends when we're playing. I can just move more.
That makes a big difference. And finally, we just have a few seconds left, but what would you say if parents are watching, what is the one big piece of advice you'd give them?
Is to start as soon as possible, exercise, healthy eating habits.
And don't be afraid to do the tough love. I mean, it's worth it in the long run. It's their life that's at stake.
It sure is. You all look great. You all look happy. Congratulations. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. John Iskander. Welcome to CDC Beyond the Data. I'm here today with Captain Heidi Blank, CDC's Chief for Obesity Prevention and Control. Welcome, Heidi.
Thanks for having me.
At today's Grand Round session, we focused on childhood obesity prevention. What are some of those targets in terms of physical activity and healthy nutrition?
Better foods, so those that are lower in calorie and high in nutrients, so things like fruits and vegetables, getting adequate physical activity, reducing screen time or sedentary time, but also stress management and sleep are really important in children. A lot of initiatives these days use something like a 10-5-2-1-0 approach. So 10 hours of sleep, 5 fruits and vegetables, less than 2 hours of screen time, 1 hour of physical activity, and 0 sugary drinks.
That's really a great way to remember that, because I think that applies across a pretty wide range of ages as well.
By promoting healthy physical activity at every stage of a child's life, at home, in the community, and at schools, exercise becomes fun and social, and healthy behaviors are developed early. Everyone has a role to play to prevent overweight and obesity in order to ensure a healthy future for our children and generations to come.